What happens in this scene is one of the biggest hints that Smiley is far more important to this story than we have been led to believe.
We gotta go now.
Hello, Kenny. Nice to see you again.
No!
Now, this moment in this episode is much more significant than you may have initially realized, as it's definitely one of many signs that Smiley himself could somehow be the entity in control of the monsters. As I really want you to take notice of how Smiley chooses to mention Kenny specifically and doesn't even say anything to Boyd. To me, this is something that ties back to a very significant moment from an earlier season, and it definitely implies that there is much more going on with Smiley in particular than we are currently aware of. But in order to really understand the point that I'm trying to make here, you have to listen very carefully to what I'm about to show you.
It's laughing at you for setting it free. It got so excited when it touched your arm. It wants to make us suffer.
Now, what we see here was possibly the first time in the entire series where we ever got explicit proof of the existence of the entity in control of the monsters. Because up to this point, the idea that there was someone, or more accurately, that there was something living in Fromland trying to destroy the people of this town was just speculation. But this moment right here changed everything, and it made it undeniably clear that he has always existed. And more importantly, it made it clear that he has been deceiving us from the very beginning in more ways than we ever thought was a possibility. Because what I want you to take note of here is that just like we see from Smiley in the caves, taunting Kenny in particular, this being that was laughing at Boyd for setting it free and bringing it back to the town was explicitly pointing out how good it felt when it was touching Kenny on the arm. And this right here is what makes me once again reconsider if Smiley's connection to the entity is much deeper than we actually realize, because this could be the writers once again implying that Smiley is one and the same with the being that we often refer to as the cicada monster / music box demon. Because the moment where Kenny gets touched in the arm appears to be referring to when Kenny was having a dream of the cicadas and the music box. But this is barely even scratching the surface for the many pieces of evidence specifically tying Smiley to the cicadas, which is why what I'm about to show you matters so much.
My blood is your blood now.
The implication that we are given by the writers when you first see this scene of something laughing at Boyd in the ruins is obviously that what he freed was the worms that were being carried by the old man in the dungeon. But what I want you to remember here is that it was only after infecting Smiley with the worms crawling under his skin that we saw the cicadas start to emerge. Basically, what I'm saying is that the ballerina who showed Boyd how to infect Smiley with the worms in the first place was actually just manipulating Boyd into freeing his boss. He was just manipulating Boyd into freeing the entity in control of the monsters, a being that was somehow trapped inside of Smiley's body, i.e. the cicadas themselves. In other words, what I'm saying is the entire thing was always a setup from the very beginning to get Boyd to release the entity himself from his prison. And when you look at how the Nightwalkers specifically held a ceremony for Smiley's resurrection, and that even the kimono itself was kneeling down in reverence of his magnificent form, definitely makes me wonder if Smiley is more important than we believe. And then the fact that we see the resurrected Smiley specifically taunting Kenny just like the cicada monster, this cannot be a coincidence when you consider all of this. And this is why what I want to show you next matters a lot for us to understand why the cicada monster / music box demon could be much more important in this story than we have ever truly understood.
The fuck? Stopped. They don't just do that.
They stopped here too.
Boyd! Come back to me.
This moment right here with fake Abby and the music box has always stood out to me ever since we first saw it. It's fair to say that we have never seen such power on display at any point prior to this in the entire series. All of the Nightwalkers, every single one of them standing still out of fear of one being is insane. Even to this day, this level of strength is something we have never truly seen ever again. The only things that even come close to this is when the boy in white appears to Tabitha in what is supposedly the real world, and of course when the kimono seemingly displayed the ability to resurrect demons at will. But apart from those two, there is nothing in the entire series that matches the sheer dominance displayed by the music box demon. And when you think about how the worms completely annihilated a Nightwalker in seconds, it definitely makes you understand why they did not want to mess with the cicada monster. But if we we assume that the original Smiley was somehow a prison for the cicadas, who is somehow also the same being as the entity in control of the monsters, and that Boyd was the one who freed it by infecting him with the worms, it would definitely make a lot more sense why they specifically set up a ceremony for his resurrection, and why the ballerina and the kimono were orchestrating events from behind the scenes to ensure his return, because unlike the Nightwalkers, they seem to be fully in control of their actions, and they would therefore likely be worshippers of this entity that we see represented by the cicadas. I also want to point out that it's very interesting how we never saw the Nightwalkers employing anything anywhere near these incredibly advanced strategies like freeing the animals to lure Boyd into the barn so they can force him to watch as they tortured someone, or what we saw with the whole ambulance trap, until after Boyd infected Smiley with the worms. And these of course could be hints given to us by the writers that they were just acting off of basic programming until the point that Boyd was able to free the entity, which gave him the ability to influence the Nightwalkers in much greater ways than when he was imprisoned, which could of course explain the increasingly complex nature of the schemes that they keep pulling off in these recent seasons. But this brings me to something else that we seriously need to discuss, because I don't see anybody else talking about it, even though it's clearly very important.
When I was in that chamber, a thing that was talking to me, telling me to give up, sure as hell wasn't my wife. So what are you?
Now, what we're really seeing here is just the tip of the spear of the level of manipulation that the people in this town are being put through by the entity in control of the monsters, and that the evil forces have truly been working overtime to deceive all of us, to make sure that we can never win. Because when you think about what we see from the man in yellow being able to shapeshift into other people, seemingly without any restriction of any kind whatsoever, it starts to open up a lot of very different possibilities about the phenomena that we keep seeing the people of the town experiencing. Like when you take a look at fake Father Cutry and how he was using his meaningless moral babble to prevent Boyd from getting information about Fatima's location, and therefore that he was doing everything he could to delay Boyd and distract him from stopping Smiley's resurrection, it starts to become really obvious that whoever this guy really is clearly not the same guy that was telling Boyd that he needed to send Frank into the box so that he could send a message to the other people living in the town. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that whatever this thing actually obviously is not the real Father Cutry. Just like the being who appears to Boyd in the dungeon is obviously not his wife. But what really confuses me about what's going on here is that the writers of this show keep implying that the man in yellow is the final villain. But when you take a look at that, for example, fake Abby, whatever it is has to be telepathic, because we see that this being somehow has control over the level of intensity of pain that the cicada victims were feeling while they were chained up in the dungeon. And when you think about how he intentionally remained invisible to Boyd's perception until he saw Boyd going to smash the music box, this could easily be explained by telepathy. And a telepathic being wouldn't know what you're going to do before you yourself know what you're going to do. So basically, because Boyd didn't know how he was going to stop the music box in the first place, this being also couldn't have known what he was going to do until right before he saw Boyd going to smash it. In other words, there's instinct and there's premeditation, something that you've planned out in advance. But what we see from Boyd here is that he was just entirely acting out of instinct. And so, when you think about it, these beings, like the music box, the boy in white, and the kimono demon who can be invisible, and specifically choose who they appear to, as well as possessing the ability to invade people's dreams, seemingly whenever they want, and even injure them in their dreams, all of them are demonstrating a higher level of power than the supposed final villain of the show, the man in yellow, who not only bleeds, but also seemingly doesn't even have telepathy and has to touch people to be able to influence them. So there's only three possibilities that I can see here. Either the man in yellow is the final villain, but he's not the most powerful entity in the show, which would be ridiculous. Or B, a lot of these beings have been the man in yellow this entire time, and he's just been using illusions to make himself seem more powerful than he actually is, to instill more fear into the people of the town. Or C, the man in yellow is not the final villain and is not the most powerful being in the show, and someone else is going to be stepping up from out of the shadows to reveal himself as having been the boss of the evil forces this entire time. Either way, what we can say for certain is that there is far more manipulation happening here than we could have ever had any idea about. So go watch this video right here to see my explanation of why Tabitha does not believe that she is a reincarnation, despite everything that she was shown by Victor's dad in Camden, Maine.